Well, good morning, and welcome to this morning's worship at UUCC. You know, recently I've gotten back into an old pastime, watching Jeopardy, the game show. If you don't know, episodes are now available like on Netflix, and I've been watching them and reminding myself when I was a kid and I used to watch it. It was a staple of dinner time television in my household growing up. And one thing Jeopardy introduced me to was the idea of a potpourri, other than like that bowl of old flower petals that I always noticed in the living rooms of my older relatives during the holidays. On Jeopardy, potpourri is like a grab bag category of questions. It could include really anything. For the writers on the show, I think it was a category to put really great questions that just didn't have another slot. So it tends to be a category with some really interesting topics, but also they can be kind of random and unconnected. So since we're here at the end of the summer, we thought it'd be interesting to take a cue from Jeopardy. Sometimes when we plan worship, we have good ideas, but they just don't fit, or there isn't necessarily space for what we had planned. So today's our chance to share with you some of the things that we find interesting or important, something spiritually rich or something intellectually challenging, but some things that just didn't quite make it into services from other weeks. We are so happy you are here with us this morning, and we're so glad to welcome you to today's service. And while the elements of today's service may not be deliberately connected by a theme or an idea, we invite all of you to find the connections we didn't plan for, but that we hope are there all the same.
Today I light our chalice, symbol of our faith that understands that it is our diversity that makes us strong, our ability to come together despite our diversity, encouraged by our diversity, and enriched by our diversity. Hi, I'm Reverend Joe, and I'd like to welcome you to our worship today. Today, we're doing something really different and really radical. We're taking a hodgepodge, a potpourri of different elements that each of us has found meaningful and putting them together and then trying to figure out how they're connected. It seems kind of appropriate right now in a world that is so disconnected and things seem so confusing, and it's hard to imagine why some things are happening. And so I hope that maybe with this example of taking things that seem disconnected and connecting them and making meaning of them, maybe it might help you make meaning of our world, which feels very chaotic right now. This is the anniversary of the 1963 March on Washington. I want to make sure that we mention that because we are working in a long haul to make the world better. It's not a quick fix. I wish it were a quick fix, but it's not. So let's not forget where we've been and keep working toward where we want to go to. With that, I want to welcome you into worship. Hope we find something here that speaks to you.
mountain passes, depths of the ocean, dew on the grasses, great things and small, with the light gently glowing, word of the wordless song, God's vision growing.
Every week when we gathered, we took time for what we call joys and concerns, where people had a chance to come here before service and light a candle in silence, or to write in our book and have their joy or sorrow read with the congregation and put a pebble in the water. We can't do that right now, but I'm thinking about all of you. I know there are several joys in our community. For that, I'm grateful. I also know there are difficult times for people, and people have sorrow. And that sorrow deserves support and care. For all these things, and lastly, for gratitude for us being together, I light our candles.
We are the certain and the seeking, the lifers and the newcomers, the beloved and the brokenhearted, the insiders and the rejected, all of whom have found a home in the extraordinary, yet intimate communities of Unitarian Universalism.
This is a reading about religious witness by Reverend Rebecca Parker. She's a theologian, author, and past president of Star King School for the Ministry, one of our UU seminaries. And I love this reading because of the expansive way that it talks about religious witness. In the midst of a world marked by tragedy and beauty, there must be those who bear witness against unnecessary destruction and who with faith rise and lead in freedom with grace and power. There must be those who speak honestly and do not avoid seeing what must be seen of sorrow and outrage, or tenderness and wonder. There must be those whose grief troubles the water, while their voices sing and speak refreshed worlds. There must be those whose exuberance rises with lovely energy that articulates earth's joys. There must be those who are restless for respectful and loving companionship among human beings, whose presence invites people to be themselves without fear. There must be those who gather with the congregation of remembrance and compassion, draw water from old wells, and walk the simple path of love for neighbor. And there must be communities of people who seek to do justice, love kindness, and walk humbly with God, who call on the strength of soul force to heal, transform, and bless life. There must be religious witness. Amen, and blessed be.
So I may have mentioned this before, but before my time here at UUCC, I actually worked at Starbucks. I was the barista out at the store on Mayfield and Salm Road. You may even have seen me there if you were out buying coffee sometime in 2016. One of the things that's really interesting, of course, about working at Starbucks, as you can imagine, is the people watching. You get to meet all kinds of people in all kinds of circumstances while you're working there. And definitely the most interesting hours for people watching were the opening hours, because Starbucks opens stupidly early. I frequently had to get up at like 4 a.m. to be at a store at 5 a.m. and you just get a very interesting group of people coming through the doors that early in the morning. So, of course, there'd be different types, different groups of people, different, personalities, different jobs. But I had one particular customer who was always very noticeable. He was a certain kind of a middle-aged guy who would come in early in the morning. And I noticed he always was talking on the phone, which he was talking to through like a Bluetooth earpiece. He was always in like a kind of sporty polo shirt. And he was talking loudly the entire time before he arrived to the front of the line. This guy was, to be blunt about it, he was a bit of a blowhard. And it's clear that, he thought his time was more important than most everybody else. But of course, I'm here to serve, so somebody comes through the line, I'm here to help them out, and happy to see them. So here's how the confrontation would usually go. Hey, yeah, give me 1 second. Hold on, I have to order some coffee. Hey, yeah, I'd like a large black coffee. Great. Would you like the house blend or our bold roast? This week, I believe it's from Kenya. Look, I said I wanted a large black coffee. I don't want some fancy nonsense. I don't need a frappuccino or a mocha macchiato or chai green tea or any of that garbage. I just want a cup of hot black American coffee. Okay, sir. Here is your large black coffee. Now, there's a lot about that encounter that, of course, is just rude, kind of dismissive, lots of things that are obviously just bad form when ordering coffee. But I think there's actually an underlying idea in that guy's assumptions that we can and should learn from as Unitarian Universalists, and that is this: expecting the world to say the same is at odds with our deepest values. Coffee is actually a huge part of American culture, like throughout history. It's been obsessed over by our nation in just waves, starting during the Civil War. And the thing is, coffee as we know it has changed that whole time. Back in the 1860s, it was just boiled in a big pot with water. In the mid-20th centuries, percolators and electronic machines became available. Then, of course, in the 90s, it was the rise of espresso and Starbucks and other coffee shops. And even now, we're in a new age of craft coffee culture. So what's interesting is that this gentleman had inherited an idea about what coffee was, And clearly he was annoyed that coffee had taken on these new forms of expression. Even though he could still get a coffee the exact way he liked, the real thing that irritated him was that so much had changed about how other people drank coffee. Now, to me, that is the absolute crux of the lesson here, because coffee, as well as pretty much everything else in the world, is dynamic and living. I mean, coffee, of course, grows throughout the world, and it participates in that interconnected web of the world and invites us to experience a part of nature when we drink it. Coffee is also part of a global market, and it confronts us with profound moral choices about where it comes from and who's growing and picking it. And most of all, it's as diverse as any drink can get, coming in forms that are popular in America, but also in all kinds of different ways in other parts of the world. And living with that complexity and all of that has to compel us to realize how limited and momentary our own perspectives and expectations can be. So when that guy came to me while working at Starbucks, I was, annoyed, of course. But part of the reason I was frustrated was because of, it was more than his rudeness. I was offended by the demand that the world had to be simpler than it actually was. One of the great gifts of being part of a UU community is really because one of the things we covenant with one another to do is to resist that instinct and to instead embrace the world in all of its complexities and in all of its dynamic and changing forms. So for you, whether it's coffee or tea, if it's flowers or dogs or whatever thing it is in this world that excites you deep down, carry with you also this lesson. Your passion to embrace these things that you care so much about are also part of how you serve the rest of our human community, to remind people that nothing we love is ever simple, and that the world never, ever stays the same.
There comes a time when you say, enough. This is the best I can heal myself. It is time to accept myself with whatever limitations and move on with my life. 20-some years ago, I had a bad stretch where things that came my way left me broken and reeling. I spent many of the ensuing years chasing healing, wanting and trying to go back to the way I used to be. I worked hard, writing, meditating, reading book after book on healing, mind and spirit, going to therapy. But because I wasn't back to my old self, I felt I was doing something wrong. Then one day it occurred to me that once something is broken, it can never be the same. Healing and curing are inherently different. Curing is defined as eliminating all evidence of disease, while healing is defined as to make sound or whole. Curing stops the bleeding, stabilizes, scabs over wounds, forms scars. To cure is to get rid of the disease. We can make a disease go away or get out of a bad situation, but we are left with deep changes to our person, and healing is what follows. I'd spent many, many hours of writing and introspection, trying to heal, trying to get back to where I was in mind and heart and spirit before all of the turmoil began. It was during yet another lunch hour in the library of pouring out my hurt and confusion onto the pages of my journal that I saw how much time I was spending on this quest to return to my old self. I saw I was chasing the impossibility of being the person I used to be. I looked at the extent of the deep and very painful work that I had done. I saw that I was cured. The things that had hurt me were gone from my life. The bleeding had stopped. The breaks were almost healed. The disease was gone. I was changed, but I could live with the changes. It was time to put my energies to other things, to get on with my life. It was a moment of taking a deep breath and saying, this is me. This is how healed I can be. This is how I am, and I accept it. I was wrapped in a feeling of deep peace for the first time in a very long time. Scars are proud reminders of what we have survived. They are badges of honor. Bones that are broken heal stronger at the break than the surrounding bone. The Japanese have the right of it. There's a form of Japanese pottery called kintsugi. It is the art of repairing broken pottery by mending the areas of breakage with lacquer dusted or mixed with powdered gold or other precious metals. As a philosophy, it treats breakage and repair as part of the history of an object, rather than something to disguise. Kintsugi celebrates each artifact's unique history by emphasizing its fractures and breaks instead of hiding or disguising them. There is inspiration in seeing beauty in broken things. Kintsugi often makes the repaired piece even more beautiful than the original. The process of kintsugi is a process much like healing. The first step is to find as many of the broken pieces as possible. They are studied. Sharp edges are smoothed. Figuring out where each piece fits, they are numbered and set side by side, waiting to be put back together. The cracks are filled in with a dark mud-like mixture to hold the pieces together. It takes time to figure out which pieces to put together first, which will have the strongest joins to support the others, and how to fill each crack to bring the pieces back together. The new joins are painted with a red lacquer that makes them look like blood vessels. It is at this stage that the artisan looks at the joins to see if there is a pattern. They look deeply at their work to see how they have healed the piece. Once fired, the lacquer is covered with gold, not to hide the repairs, but to bring out the beauty of the new joins. In a TED Talk on kintsugi, Audrey Harris says, "I am reminded when I look at the piece of how I broke it and how I fixed it." I'm not the person I was all those years ago. I found that when I stopped trying to heal and moved on with my life, that real healing began. Most of the brokenness is healed, and those places in me are stronger. There are still pieces that are missing, but I have filled them with other things that give me strength. I have scars, and they are beautiful, proud badges of what I survived. I am happy, I'm content, and that is enough.
You don't get harmony when everybody sings the same note. Each week, we come together as a people. Together, we share stories, love, aspiration. We also share our bounty in ways that express our religious UU values. May this important ritual of sharing abundance remind us that making our world better is a task best shared.
Well, you wonder why I always dress in black, why you never see bright colors on my back, and why does my appearance seem to have a somber tone? Well, there's a reason for the things that I have on. I wear black for the poor and the beaten down, living in the hopeless, hungry side of town. I'll wear it for the prisoner who has long paid for his crime, but is there because he's a victim of the times. I wear black for those who've never read or listened to words that Jesus said about the road to happiness through love and charity. Why you think he's talking straight to you and me? Well, we're doing mighty fine, I suppose, in a streak of lightning cut fancy clothes. But just so we're reminded of the ones who are held back, up front there ought to be a man in black. I'll wear it for the sick and lonely old, for the reckless ones whose bad trip have left them cold. I wear black in mourning for the lives that could have been, and each week we lose 100 fine young men. I wear it for the thousands who have died, believing that the Lord was on their side. I'll wear it for another 100,000 who have died, believing that we all were on their side. Oh, well, there's things that never will be right, I know. And things need changing,
Greetings today from Euclid Creek Reservation. I brought you here because this is one of my favorite places to come to work in the mornings when it's not so quiet and I can watch people walking and taking care of themselves. It's a place that is for me somewhat spiritual, and in keeping with our theme today of things that don't necessarily fit together but are still important to us spiritually, I brought you here. I also brought a book. This book, called American Transcendentalism by Philip Gura, describes another collection of Unitarians and people near Unitarianism called the Transcendentalists. So in this book, he quotes James Elliott Cabot, who is a very early biographer of Ralph Waldo Emerson, and he says, he observed that the movement's supporters comprised of an ever-shifting and open-ended group. The Transcendental Club, so named, he claimed, by the public and not by the participants, comprised the occasional meeting of a changing body of liberal thinkers, agreeing in nothing but their liberality, where no two thought alike. And this feels fitting for me to talk about this morning, even a little bit. When we're talking about Potpourri, how Valerie brought a reading from Rebecca Parker and Peggy told the story about her own growth. Allan shared a story about Starbucks and what he learned working there. And I'm bringing you into nature. Also, you've just watched a video by an artist I've just discovered called Andy Alloo doing a Johnny Cash cover. Sometimes this is how our religious life feels together. It feels a little hodgepodgey. It feels like we don't have a center, like we don't come together in one place. But I would say we do come together. We come together even if we don't all think alike. We come together because we don't all think alike, and this is a place, either virtually or in physicality, where we can come and know that our diversity of opinion will be not only tolerated, but celebrated. Right now, we're dealing with a lot as a nation and a world. We're dealing with this pandemic, with leadership that hasn't been consistent in its addressing of the pandemic. We're dealing with a brand new series of shootings, this time in Kenosha, Wisconsin. We're dealing with being really tired of being in crisis. We're dealing with a lot. And that's kind of what Potpourri is. It's a lot of different components that come together to make a whole. In some ways, I actually think of it more as a bricolage. Bricolage is an art form where you take things that are disparate and you put them together. And you don't take all the things, you don't add all the things into the mix. You carefully curate what you will keep and what you won't. And together, the items you find, or the time you find yourself in, I guess, you curate that to make something meaningful, maybe something beautiful. It is the act of curation in which the artist makes the bricolage. So I invite you to take what you've heard today from different perspectives and different ideas, your feelings about what's going on in the world and how hard it is, and the little joys in life that I'm sure you also can see now and again, like an egg, for example, from a chicken that someone I know had this week for the first time. You note the passing of a long-term member like Walt Nichols. You think about his wife and how much they loved each other and how much you may have really admired Walt. life invites us into performing bricolage all the time. And so I hope you'll take the invitation to intentionally curate the things around you, the ideas around you, and keep coming back to our space, whether it's virtually or physically. And know that here, no two ever fully agree, but still we come together and return together over and over again to create a community based not in conformity, but in pursuit of what is true for us, what is real for us, what is good. It is through that pursuit that we find our spiritual center as a people and as individuals. I hope that you'll accept my invitation to engage in collecting, curating, and finding what means the most to you.
Our time together in worship has come to a close, and so I extinguish our chalice, symbol of our faith, knowing that what you've learned and found here, you'll take with you for the rest of your day, the rest of your week, until we can be together again. As we prepare to leave our time together in worship, I leave you with one final image. This is an image I took and created at the University of British Columbia, and is one example of bricolage that I was speaking of earlier. As you enjoy, I hope, this photograph of little pebbles and sticks on a bridge, I'd like to leave you with these words of a favorite hymn. Go now in peace. May the love of God, may the love of Spirit, may the Spirit of love surround you everywhere you may go.